Thank you all for coming this evening. It is great to have you here. I'm delighted to have a great audience for our final Nancy Lassalle Dance Series lecture. Nancy's in the back of the room. Because of Nancy, we are able to offer this wonderful opportunity, and because of the Yard on the Vineyard and our new relationship with them, we're able to bring people that are coming to the Vineyard to Woods Hole. So thank you, Nancy, and thank you to the Yard. I'm going to introduce Iris Fanger, who's part of our dance committee, and she will do the introductions this evening. Thank you.
I must say I have reams of information, none of which I'm going to tell you, because looking up Indian dance and trying to remind myself of how exciting and wonderful it is, this will be a great treat for all of us to have you here. One of my favorite moments when I was young was rounding a corner at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and seeing this great life-sized mandala of the Lord Shiva, Lord of the Dance. I'm sure those of you who are New Yorkers have seen it. And I looked at it and I said, oh, it's Ted Shawn. Because those of you who are dance people know that when Ruth St. Denis and Ted Shawn went to India in the 1920s, they found Indian dance and brought back so much of their elements. But of course they were Americans translating Indian dance for America. Another very interesting American woman named Esther Luella Sherman, born in 1890 or thereabouts in Michigan, grew up as a child loving India, had never seen it. She was in a little town in Michigan. She ran away at age 15 with an Indian revolutionary, a man who had been exiled by the Brits from India because of his fighting for independence for India, married him, and at age 16 had her daughter Indrani. Her mother, Esther, took the name of Ranee Devi and met Anna Pavlova when Anna Pavlova toured India in the 1920s. And Anna Pavlova said, you must bring back the classical dance of India, because by then it had fallen into disrepute. The Brits had banned it in 1910 in their infinite wisdom of trying to take over a population. And this beautiful classical dance, which had been in existence in India from the 2nd century Common Era until then, through the 19th century, was banned by the British and brought back by an American woman who had become Hindu on her marriage. Now think that one through if you're thinking about the true grit. I had the great pleasure of working with Indrani as a colleague for about 8 years at Harvard in the 1970s. She was one of the predecessors of this wonderful family. So Indrani began dancing at age 9 in her mother's troupe, and she had a daughter named Sukanya, who teaches Indian dance at Bates, has performed in Minnesota, and they know them. And the point of what I'm saying is this whole idea of the handing down of dance through the generations, person to person, mother to daughter, father to son, is as important in the West as it is in India. And so now we have this wonderful troupe, Mother Ranee, the 2 daughters who are dancers, who are choreographers, and not only have they studied the classical dance of India and worked that dance exactly how they were taught, because it's very important that they worked with the teachers, but they are trying to bring it into the 21st century and bring in ideas and spirituality and notions of contemporary dance. So I would like to introduce you to this wonderful family, the Ragamala Dance Company, and hear what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such a kind introduction, and I feel that we could spend our time listening to you, actually. That would be so fascinating. My name is Aparna Ramaswamy. This is my mother, Ranee. This is Ashwini Ramaswamy, my sister, and together we run Ragamala Dance Company. Before we share with you about the form, about our vision of the form and the work that we do and the work that we'll be presenting on Martha's Vineyard this weekend, we'd like to take about a little under 7 minutes and show you a few excerpts of the work that we have done over the last few years, so you just get a small taste of our vision. So we'd like to start with that, and then we spend a little bit of time presenting information, but we'd really love to have a conversation with all of you. So here we are. Okay. Yeah. Could we go louder, maybe? Yeah. I'm doing this.
Oh, the sound is gone.
Yep. The sound went.
We know.
No more sound.
Sound coming.
Lovely.
I think that's it. So those are just 4 brief examples of our currently touring work, and the last one will be premiering in April of this coming year. So I think we'll just take turns and give you a little bit of information. The form in which we practice is called Bharatanatyam. It is from the southeastern part of India, specifically from the state of Tamil Nadu. Its origins go back 2,000 years to mythological times. However, Indian dance, this form especially, is practiced widely in the diaspora throughout the world. But while it has these ancient origins, it really grows and develops within its practitioners. So it is constantly evolving and changing, and the aesthetic of the artist is equally as important as the form that they carry from their teacher. The word Bharatanatyam comes from 4 Sanskrit words: Ba for bhava or expression, Ra for raga or melody, Ta for thala or rhythmic cycle, and Natyam means dance. So that in a nutshell is the form in which we practice.
And now I will tell you a story. Thank you for helping me with the microphone. I have a really bad sore throat and cold, so I'll try to make it as clear as possible. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
So our story is, it starts with me. In 1978, I moved as an immigrant to Minnesota with my family, husband and a small child. And I had studied dance growing up in India, not to become a professional. My father was an entomologist and my mother was a homemaker, and they had no plans for me to be a dancer, but to just get married and be a housewife. But I had studied 10 years of dance, and then when I moved here with my family, the Minnesota community was very small, Indian community. There were only about 100 people, and they were very excited that I had studied this form, and they asked me to perform at a Diwali function. Now, I had not danced for 10 years. I had no costume, no music, but I took a chance. And I think a lot of times, if I had just missed that, I wouldn't be here today. So I bought a tape recorder. Somebody gave me 2 pieces of music, and I tried to recreate from whatever I had studied. I made up these pieces, wore a sari, and I performed. And I found that I still had the love for the form. And the people who watched it really liked my dance. So they asked me if I would teach their children. But I didn't know anything, really. I didn't know any of the basics. So I went to India for 4 months to study. I did that for about 3 years. Aparna was still quite young. And I would come back and teach. I started teaching her and also performing what I had studied in India. Then in 1983, one of the most magnificent performers of this form, Alarmail Valli, who is just, we would say she's a living legend. She came to Minnesota. All my life, she lived only 2 miles away from my house, but I had never seen her perform. She was 4 years younger than me. She came to Minneapolis and she did a 2-week residency and a couple of performances. Aparna and I saw the performance, and we were just riveted by the style. How I've never seen dance like that before. So we did the 2-week residency with her, and at the end of which she said, you know, your daughter is really good. If you bring her, I mean, she was only in her 20s. I was 29 and she was 4 years younger. So we were not really old people, now were we really young. So she said, if you bring her to India, I will teach her. So 2 months later, the two of us ended up, my parents lived in Madras, it was very easy. We spent 4 months and we studied with her, and our partnership as dancers, students, performers began in 1983. And when we came back to Minnesota, I started to teach. And also, Aparna had to go to school, she had to go to high school, she had to go to college. So she was performing very seriously, but I was creating work. Because the idea was what I had received from this teacher. By the way, they had the same teacher. Indrani Rahman and my teacher had the same. So when Indrani Rahman was older, my teacher was very young. So they had the same, it was the same style. So I wanted not only the Indian community to be an audience to this, but I wanted the general audience to understand and appreciate this art form. So 2 things that happened was accessibility and education. So I started to create work using the vocabulary with poets like Robert Bly read and I danced. We had dances with jazz musicians, jazz dancers, ballet dancers, flamenco dancers. So, you know, just to make the audience get more interested and come. Because if we kept doing only the very classical form, at that time, this was almost 35 years ago, the 100 people wouldn't be coming back over and over again. So we wanted to excite them. So I did all this to expand the art form and to build an audience to this style. At the same time, education was important. So travel to the smallest schools, 400 miles away, 300 miles away, teaching Indian culture through dance. So the variety, how diverse the culture is and how diverse the art form is. So slowly, by educating the audience, educating presenters and funders, we actually got very well established in Minneapolis, to start with, in Minnesota. Then Aparna finished her college and she joined me, and I formed Ragamala with that idea to take this art form to the general, to all audiences and not just to the Indian audience. So I formed Ragamala in '92, and when Aparna finished college, she joined me as co-artistic director. So then we started to work together, and our aesthetic changed quite a bit to what you see now, because at that time there were no musicians in Minneapolis. You couldn't find drummers or singers, but now things have changed. Over the years, over 40 years, our work has developed, and Aparna will talk about what our aesthetic and what we do now. And then Ashwini joined. She joined our classes and then our teacher's class, and now she performs full-time and runs the company with us. So now I'll let Aparna talk about what is the nucleus of the work that we do now.
So, as Ranee has told you the story, our identity as first-generation Indian Americans, first-generation immigrants, was very, very important to our work. And so our work is a clear reflection of this cultural hybridity. And so thematically, in thinking of our work, we are very interested and dedicated to looking at the myth and the multidimensionality of Indian culture, but through the lens of our American lives. And what we are seeing is that there's an extremely dynamic conversation between history, ancestry, and the present. And while it is a story that many Americans can tell, this is our personal story, and that is what we bring out in the work that we create. And so we use this dance form, Bharatanatyam, and we often say, we keep saying it's an ancient form, but it's a living, breathing form. And that is our mission, is to really underscore that this form is a living language with which we can create works that speak to the contemporary experience and issues that we feel are important, or human emotions that we feel that we really want to key in on. And so we use this as a way to really talk about, in a larger sense, talk about culture, what it is to receive culture, what it is to interpret it, to codify it, to create your own culture. And so when we pass it on to our children and future generations and our students and the work that we're creating, it's really what we have gained from this great master and what she has gained from her teacher, and how we see it in our vision and how we have been influenced in our lives by all the people we meet. And that is the future of culture, and we all have that story, and that's the story that we tell. And so, for example, the piece that you saw, so this form is traditionally primarily a solo form. So in the second clip you saw, that was my solo performance at the Joyce Theater in New York. And so each of us still train and practice as solo performers. I do a lot of solo performances, and last time I was at the Yard, it was my solo work that I was doing. But what makes us really unique is this idea of an ensemble, and having 5 women that work together, but each performing in some ways as their own individual person, as a soloist within a group. And so you have each person's identity and experience come out through that performance and connect in a very spontaneous way with each other and with the audience as well. So the third work that you saw after that, the one with the projections, that is entitled Written in Water. And Written in Water is our exploration of a 2nd century Indian board game. And it's called Paramapadam, and it's the precursor to Snakes and Ladders.
That was the original, which later on the British took and made it Snakes and Ladders, and then it became Shoots and Ladders.
But what we were very interested in are the spiritual underpinnings of the game. This idea of the journey of life, the vices and the virtues, the idea of seeking transcendence. And what do we all do in our effort to seek transcendence? And so that is what we were really following as a roadmap in creating this work. And
Because the game board is like still very, people still play it. I used to play it with my grandmother, and older, elder ladies on the floor, the board would be placed, and you play all night, you don't eat, you fast, and it's a distraction, and each square is a story. You go up and down up the ladder, down the snake, and they explain to you the stories as you play. And the kids fall asleep around, and the adults play all night, and then they break the fast and they feast. So it's not something that is archaic or it's not played at all. It is something that is very vibrant, and it's part of the tradition of India. So our ideas come from such a place where it is relevant, but at the same, it is also Snakes and Ladder game is a very popular. People understand what a Snakes and Ladder game is. I think even in economics and other subjects, people talk about snakes and ladders. So
in our research, in looking for other materials to draw from, we read the Sufi epic poem, The Conference of the Birds, which is a 12,000 verse poem that is about this group of 30 birds or 100 birds, and then they fall off into 30. But as they seek their leader, and they're finding the truth that's really within themselves. And again, this idea of transcendence was really came to the fore for us. And at the end of each of those, the crux of each of those religious traditions actually are quite a, it doesn't all neatly wrap in a package. But we took certain ideas, the idea of traveling through different valleys or states of being, and this development of us as humans, and through our experiences and through our emotional states, to really become who we are and who we want to be. And so we had several textual sources that we were layering as we created this work. So when we do create a work, we start with absolutely nothing. We have these ideas and we conduct a lot of research and we create the narrative structure, and then we look for lyrics and we work with the composer and we work together with the composer to create a score. And we also put together a musical ensemble that is a new ensemble, usually of a hybrid group, so South Indian with another tradition if it's appropriate for this work. And we work with visual elements as well. So the idea is to circle back to this multi-dimensional quality that the Indian arts have, this idea of movement, poetry, music, drama, sculpture, theater, psychology, and create one universal experience that is not just uniquely Indian, but something that all of us as humans can really understand and feel and relate to.
And it also gives various avenues for the audience to enjoy, whether it's the visual art or the dance or the music. So it's not just one art form, but it's a combination of them. Because in India, dance and drama and music were never separate. They were all always together. They come together.
So Ranee and I have been working together for a very long time. So as she said, even though we're mother and daughter, because we have these very early experiences, our formative experiences with our teacher, and really being the only people who could, once we left her, support each other in our training and in our practice, we became very, very close, and we really are very different people and have different artistic visions and thoughts, but that works very well as we bounce them off of each other. And as my younger sister has been dancing and has started creating, she has yet another point of view that she has added to the mix. And so this weekend we're very proud to present her full evening work, Nocturne, which she'll talk about at the Yard.
So, having grown up basically ensconced in the conversations, the music, the dance of these women and our teacher, I have this really strong vision of work that has been kind of transmitted to me through them. So we have a shared kind of aesthetic, but then we personally express that in different ways. So I kind of feel as though I'm a little bit more of an American in between the three of us. I was born in the United States, whereas both of them were born in India. And it took me, I was approaching Bharatanatyam from a slightly different place, where not just as something that was destined for me, I think is how it was for Aparna. I kind of wanted to explore other ways of creativity. I was really into drawing, singing, painting, and dance as well. And I was an English literature major in college, and so I'm really influenced by not just Indian literature, but world literature. Nocturne is my first evening length work, and we find that if you take something that's personal to you and then you transcribe that through your art, it does end up becoming universal, because people can come to the realization that we connect with each other if we can kind of draw on our own personal perspectives. So my grandfather, my mother had mentioned that my grandfather was an entomologist, and one night we were talking and he mentioned a specific insect that did something that impacted the entire world, and it was a nocturnal insect. And that stuck with me, and I thought, what happens at night that we don't think about during the day? What secret worlds, what do people hide in the night? It's kind of an allegory for letting your true personality come out when people think that no one's looking. So I conceived of this work that has three parts: the natural world, as these animals and insects that are very, very vital to the world come out at night, and what are their movements like and what are they like. The emotional world of in the night you can be your true emotional self with maybe your partner or your lover, but during the day they might leave you, and then you have this longing for them. So it's this idea of togetherness and longing once the sun comes up. And then the third section is a spiritual exploration of, there's a specific time in India that they say between the hours of 3 and 4 that is, you can connect most freely with the divine. And during that time, will you be distracted by thoughts, or will you be able to directly communicate with some higher power? So the evening kind of moves from the natural world into the spiritual world more deeply. And I've used texts from the Vedas, which are ancient Indian texts, and also the poet Borges, because I'm interested in his poems of the night, which kind of take on a more metaphysical tone. And the work has no lyrics. This poetry is all what I see and is transmitted into the body, so that it kind of has this abstraction to it for the viewer to be able to put into it what they believe. So I've put something forward that I hope that as a viewer, you won't need to be led along every step of the way, but these influences are hopefully in the theater and in the bodies and in your minds as you watch it.
The music.
And the music is the original score by Shubhendra Rao, who plays the sitar. He's Ravi Shankar's top student, and he's married to Saskia Rao Dehas, who has created her own instrument, the Indian cello. She's designed it herself. It's the only instrument of its kind, and they play together. And then there's the kanjira, which is a South Indian drum, one-handed drum. So that gives us our connection to the South Indian music that we're used to dancing to. So it is a very different musical score than we're used to, that we would traditionally be dancing to in South India. Kind of helps evoke these different states of being within Nocturne. So that's what, if you come, you will hopefully experience on Thursday and Saturday.
So we would love to open this up and answer as
Can I-
well as we can any questions we have. Yeah.
When I was watching the film, I was struck by how much it reminded me, completely different, but reminded me of classical ballet, in that there were so many stylized movements that you made. But from what you're saying, you have put those movements in yourself. Could you talk about that a little more?
So to clarify, you are absolutely correct. It is a codified dance language like ballet. We have a very clear vocabulary that we learn. The form itself has, kind of to put it simply, it has two aspects, an abstract aspect and a narrative aspect. And so we use our first several years of training to learn the building blocks of the abstract form. So we learn so the 75% of our movements are done in a demi-plie position, and then we have these arm movement. I mean, it's very, very clear, it's very symmetrical, it's extremely percussive, and while the expression of each school of Bharatanatyam within, just like ballet has different schools, the way the steps are done, the way the lines are, will be different. The steps are very similar. So that's the basic building block. Same thing with the gestural language. So in expressive dance, we have, again, they're kind of building blocks. You have body positions. We have 28 single-handed and 24 double-handed gestures. We have, but the most important is the emotional sentiment and the expression and the expressiveness, where the dancer becomes an actor. So all of that, how we say it is, it's all still a language. So when we are writing our own poems, we use that language. We feel that that language is the most potent to express what we want to say. So we don't take, we'll never take this and change the angle of it. We will do something else to express that, but we'll never change the integrity of the language that we received from our teacher.
Yeah, it's like the alphabets. We don't, we can make, there are alphabets that are connected to make words and sentences. There is grammar, there is proper way of using them. If you break that, the language goes. So we have the vocabulary of movements that we use, it exists. But when we use it in rhythmic movement, the mathematical the complexity comes from the choreographer, who translates it to the drummer. And we can create that complexity, just like a mathematician does with your multiplication tables and so on. So you just take this language, and depending upon how creative the choreographer is, you can create complex dance pieces or very simple pieces.
And so just, again, we've been training, you learn just the feet for a year or 2 years. Then you add your arm positions. You learn your first dance after 3 years. It's years of training to get the grammar, get everything done properly. And then we still take class, we still refine our technique, but then after a certain amount of time you feel free to create these poems, but always staying true to the integrity of our form.
So yeah, I would say the individual expression is the fact that the choreographer is the main composer of we set all of the rhythmic structures. We work with the composer we decide what melodic modes we want to express. We
What poetry
we
you want to
construct
use.
the work, and so that is really something that is a unique individual thing. Direct it, and then the performer has a whole different, and so when you are the performer in your own work, once again you have your own kind of creative, spontaneous situation. I hope I answered. Did we answer your question?
Yes, and the how you call it, language, how fluent you are, how easy do the
Now we're gonna move on.
hands flow, all of that matters.
My sister just says, you can't spend this much time on each question.
Okay, I used to do research and cooperate with IIT Madras,
Ah,
and which is familiar to you, of course. And during my stays in Chennai, at the time when it was still called Madras, I came to really to love South Indian music and of course Bharatanatyam. Now, you mentioned Ravi Shankar and North Indian music. My question is, could you explain, or is it not possible, in a few words, the difference between South Indian and North Indian dance? It's very complicated, but if it's not possible, just tell us.
the dance, South Indian and North Indian dance, like Indrani Rahman used to do the Odissi. There are 5 classical dance styles in India. They all have the language of gestures and the language of rhythms, but they are slightly different from the basic positions are different in the 5 styles. So as soon as you see the standing position in the North Indian Kathak, it was influenced by the Mughal court. So the feeling of the whole, whereas the South Indian Bharatanatyam was thrived in the temples of southern India. So you can see what the atmosphere must have been when they were performed. And in Kerala you have Kathakali, which is like Kabuki, where they had the huge masks, and it was mostly men who danced, even the female parts. So the costumes make a lot of difference, but if you see the performance a few times and the costume and the whole makeup, you will see how distinctly different they are. The North Indian music is very different from the South Indian music. We use the tabla, which is the two-headed, two single drums. Yes. So we use different. That's right. So the mridangam is used in the South Indian, which is a drum played. It's a one drum with 2 heads, whereas in the North Indian style they have 2 drums. So they use the right hand and the left hand. So their musical the styles are very different also. When you hear it, you can understand. But you have to have an ear of listening to it a lot of times to distinctly tell the difference. If I point out to you 3 times, you would know the 4th time the difference between them. The instruments are different too.
What I noticed in the times that I've seen the Indian dance, particularly when I've watched the teaching, to me the biggest difference between Indian dance and Western dance is the rhythms. It's so different, and that was what our students always had the hardest time with. Can you briefly talk about that?
Yeah, I'll make it as simple as possible. When I often hear when a Western choreographer is choreographing, they always count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2. We can't do anything counting just 1, 2. It is always takita taka dimi taka takita taka dimi taka dimi ta ding girnata da ding girnata da ding girnata da. So if there is an 8-beat rhythm, it goes. You can do a multiplication of 8, or you can do 4 plus 4, or you can do 2 plus 2 plus 3 plus 1. Whatever the divisibility. So these spoken syllables form the basics of these rhythmic breakdowns. So when you learn the rhythms at the beginning, when Aparna Ashwini said it takes a long time to learn the feet, you learn them not by saying 1, 2, 1, 2. We already say takka dimmi 4, takkitta 3, dittam 2, takka takkitta 5, takka takkitta takka dimmi 7, takka takkitta takka dimmi takka 9. So they all go in various meters. So you can add all of that. You know, I've heard a Western musician say there is 285 eighths in this piece. And I was like, it's much easier for us if you say, well, if you divide it by 3, 4, 2, you know, it makes it much more interesting and complex. So instead of making it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it is the classical Carnatic system is supposed to be one of the most complex musical systems in the world. Everybody talks about their culture like that. So, yes.
I have a question. In classical ballet, usually you take a music and you express the dance. The dance is supposed to express the music, or at least to illustrate the music. In your case, do you order the music from the choreography? Or so is the choreographer the first thing, and then the musician does his work according to the choreography, or is it the music first, as us?
Do you want to talk? Okay. Music, I'll just say that music is extremely important to us. Our teacher says you see the music and hear the dance. But the way the dance is approached with music, you want to talk about it?
Well, there are different ways that you can do it. So there are, and we have done this too with our teacher. Let's say there's a beautiful song that exists, that was created 200 years ago, that you still feel is very emotional and relevant to you. 100 choreographers will do it 100 different ways, because there is just the outline of the song. And then when you create it for dance, you instruct your musician to sing. So that piece that you saw, the solo, she was singing one line. It's a 40-minute piece, but she was singing that one line for 7 minutes. And I was telling various stories to express a theme. And the whole thing was done spontaneously. So she would see that if my arm goes up and I'm doing this longing thing, then she'll go up. And she'll follow me like that. And so some other choreographer will set something completely different and instruct her singer to sing differently. That's one thing that can happen. But that's just the melodic and the narrative parts. Then there's the whole rhythmic thing where we create rhythmic structures. So you want to say something?
No, I think I understand I think we're not answering.
We're not answering the
I
question.
think so. Because there's two ways. You can take a piece of music and create dance to it. A choreographer does it all the time. But we actually do an idea. The idea of the game board comes first. Then comes the poetry. Then comes the musician who sets this poetry into music with us. So we say, here we want to say that, compare the battlefield. So we want to get that feeling. So we say, how about this raga? How does this melody work for it to pour our hearts out? Then we sit and we make the music with her, with the composer.
And then you have this situation where once the music is then created, you can talk to the musician and say, when I do this, can you pull it this way so that it's more emotional for the audience?
So there you're not just picking a song, but it's bigger. Yes.
I wanted, you have many narrations in these performances, but we as a society, I think we are used to the text. You, I think, touched upon the poetry, from Félix Borges, but I would like to know, how do we know your narration as a text? How do we understand it?
So, you want to talk?
No, you.
Okay. So we used to do some of the original, the work when Ranee first started creating, and then I was creating work. We used a lot of English translation in the presentation itself. And after a while,
you give it.
no,
No,
it was
spoken.
spoken.
Okay.
Because
Poetry, the
Indian
poetry was
music,
spoken
The
with the
song.
music. But as our aesthetic evolved, we felt that was actually creating a little bit of a. We just moved away from it. We felt that it created a little bit. It was made too much information. The mystery was a little removed, and our direct connection with the music and the space and the themes were dampened. So we moved away from that, and we started coming with this, and our ideas became bigger, more abstract in some ways, but also more human and more universal. And so so it's not just this is the story of a person who is doing this, but rather these are the emotions that we're evoking, we are feeling, we are living in this moment. And so what we do now is we do it in the program notes, where we provide information about our inspirations, about the texts that we draw from, and then we ask our audience to just sit and
Let us
sit back
trust
and
us, trust
experience
yourselves.
and just experience and see what they feel without understanding every line. Because even in India, most audiences don't understand. They don't know the dance language. It's a specific language. They will know the song if it's a song that's known to them or if it's in a language that they speak. But there are so many languages spoken in India, that's usually not the case. So there is this idea of the mystery and just the emotionality of the artistic presentation that we want to preserve.
There is one thing in Indian dance, which is the dancer is always focused on the audience. Also, definitely. We are pouring our hearts out for you. So when it's a constant connection. It is not removed. We are not dancing and have no connection with the audience. We are constantly, everything we do, each line is done so many times. Sometimes it is our feeling. Sometimes it's the feeling of the storyteller. Sometimes we are the storytellers. So there are so many entrances and exits into the audience that there is definitely an impact. It's been 25 years. We have traveled the world and people definitely feel something because the dance form itself has a spiritual core. So when you watch the dance, it's not about entertainment only. There is something, even if you're not from our culture, you are moved. And that's a guarantee. So they say that the rasa and bhava, there are two words. We put in the emotions and you feel it. It's like cooking. The flavors, when you put the spices and when you eat, you feel it. We put in the emotions and we feel it and you feel it. That's our goal. That's what we'd like to achieve as a dancer. So that definitely has some kind of resonance with the audience.
We haven't been watching the time.
Oh.
We have not been watching the time at all. So
Okay,
I
there's
don't know
3
if anyone
questions.
has a...
We have missed the bus. That's okay.
Oh, no, that's okay, but I don't. Yeah, let's answer the questions.
3 questions. That's 4. Okay.
Talk about the fact that there is no male Indian dancer in your company.
Oh, we had a Japanese male dancer who danced with us for almost 10, 12 years. And then he went on to doing Buto. So we lost him. But now we are a company of 5 very strong dancers. So that has a certain representation that we'd like. Diana Kenny was my student 15 years ago.
Yes.
And she used to perform with us. She lives here.
I was just going to say that if you can get to the Vineyard, you have to see these women dance. The first time I laid eyes on them was the early 90s in Minneapolis, and I had had a whole lifetime of Western dance training, and it absolutely floored me. I said, I have to go learn this. So I started studying with Ranee. And Aparna, I think you were like high school or something like that.
Are we revealing ages?
And so I started learning it. It was the hardest form I've ever studied, much harder than ballet. It's very, very demanding, very intricate. And you are incredibly moved. There's something spiritual going on that you can't even if you don't understand the language or anything about what the story is, you definitely feel it watching it. But you guys, I was just thinking back to those days because, so this was when Ranee was first starting the company. and she was exploring all these ideas of collaborations, and she'd come running in to rehearsal and say, I saw these taiko drummers, we have to work with them, or flamenco, and I remember Aparna, most of the time you were like,
No! I was the traditionalist.
yeah, she was very much wanting to stay in tradition, and Ranee was wanting to experiment and try all these different things. And I think you were even experimenting with changing the movement then. Like
Just
it wasn't
because the
always-
music, it had to be. With a particular music, the movement has to change a little bit.
Yes.
Yes, I was quickly stopped by
Well, we
that.
found our road. We found our road.
Yes, and so I was wondering, do you still have that tension, or have you found a place where
Oh,
you...
we found a place.
Okay.
We do.
Oh,
The back and forth is
But it's not,
integral to the creation because
yeah,
the conversations that happen, otherwise it would just be one thing that happens.
it's less extreme.
Instead
though.
it becomes chiseled and chiseled and chiseled by conversation, and then it's a product of everyone.
Yes,
Yes.
and you've learned now what's too far,
And we,
like, and what's too conservative.
yeah,
where
and I
you are
think
in the
we
middle.
don't, yes, and we push each other just right, in the right amount, or we hold back, or we edit. It's constantly going, and we've gotten really good at figuring out that process really fast,
Yeah.
too. And also, there's something else I was going to say, and I forgot
And
what it was.
they're amazing cooks, and they're hilarious in real life. They're just like wonderful people.
I just wanted to say real quick that we have, just to wrap up your question, there's not anything that's saying that we couldn't have a male dancer again, but we really enjoy the female energy that is created on stage and the way that we interact with each other and the audience. It works really well for us to have all women, but it's not, exclusively that way.
And I'm sorry to do this, but I realized to your question, the first question, I think one of the reasons why we feel, and people do change the structure of the movement and the grammar, but it's because of this spiritual core and backbone. There's context to every movement. It feels like there is this kind of spiritual, historical, but present kind of energy around everything that tells its own story. And so for us, it feels right to use it like that without trying to change it. So
there's a question.
She was before me.
Okay.
Go ahead. I have so many questions, I don't know where to start. I was going to follow up on one where you talked about changing the form but keeping certain things intact, like the vocabulary. I'm thinking of mudras particularly. You wouldn't change them because it's like the alphabet. You wouldn't change the angle. These are the hand gestures that are storytelling. They're very specific in their meaning, but you're bringing it to audiences who won't understand that meaning automatically, right? Mm-hmm. So do you see them more as design rather than meaningful positions that tell a very specific thing? Are you incorporating them in your choreography a different
you didn't just
way?
learn this right now today, did you?
No.
Okay.
I studied Carnatic music and a little bit of Bharatanatyam.
Oh, awesome. So can I say one scene in Written in Water?
No, she's not dancing. You've been working on this.
One scene in Written in Water. So here is Amir. We have a South Indian singer and Iraqi singer, Amir El Safar, because it's Written in Water and Conference of the Birds. The game board and the Conference of the Birds. They are overlapped. And we are in squares. We are moving from square to square with rhythmic abstract movements, and all of a sudden you land on a snake. You come down, and we are portraying a death of a young soldier, and she bursts out in Carnatic music in that ragam, wailing, and I'm falling on the ground and
with a
crying.
poem that's 2,000 years old.
I'm crying for this, and Aparna's, she's feeling that, she's interpreting, and Amir sings about a bird. It's symbolic, who has lost its mate, it's fallen down. He's singing it in Iraqi language. And Aparna is wailing, and we are all wailing. Every gesture is Bharatanatyam. But it's on a square, and whereas old Bharatanatyam doesn't combine Iraqi music with it. That's where our creativity comes. Our American work comes from that. The form doesn't change, language doesn't change, our gestures don't change, classical music doesn't change. How do we bring this together to an American audience? Nobody needs to know what happens there if you watch that sadness, because the musicians are amazing. They are bringing that feeling for us to express that. So like that, with each square, sometimes we move on to a very joyful, and there is a song, and that is completely Bharatanatyam. Everything is Bharatanatyam, but it's placed in it's made in a bigger, much bigger way than at least that's what we want to do for this audience. So if we were living in India, we would probably be doing some, Indian music and Indian dance for that audience. But we travel everywhere, and we do want people to enjoy this so they can go to India and see the real Bharatanatyam dance.
Real Bharatanatyam?
Well, we are real.
No, I'm pointing at you.
Are you putting me? I just have a suggestion before we finish. We've had so many ideas. Some of us have heard a lot of things for the first time. Other people here know a lot about different kinds of Indian music and culture. What I would really like after this wonderful conversation is for you to play the video again.
Oh, good idea. Just even a little
So
bit.
that now, in the context of having heard all that you had to say, to see you dance again.
You had a question. We will.
Yeah, just quickly, because the tradition is a Hindu.
Yes.
It's the Hindu worship.
Yes.
Does that come into it for you?
For us, yes, it is a Hindu
Worship.
spiritually, yes. But the Sufism all started at one time from India. So the spirituality of ascension is the same. So we have to be now as broad-minded to bring all these religions and culture together. Otherwise, we are not Americans. So can we show the... Yes, Mark.
Could you put the, I was very struck by the costume that especially you wore in the first one, the yellow and purple, the pleated panel between the pant legs, how it flowed, and the colors complemented all your movement. Is that part of your collaborative effort between the music and the dancers to design the costumes? And also, how did you get the evolution of that beautiful panel?
So that costume is a traditional Bharatanatyam costume. That is, it's evolved again and changed, but that is the costume that most dancers wear. It is designed to look like a sari, but you can move in it. So you have, with certain specifications, you buy a 6-yard sari, and then it has the pallu, or the top half, like the sari wrap. And so the pleats that we wear in the middle, it's a pleated panel, that is supposed to be, so in a sari, we tie a 6 and we pleat the middle. So it gives you space so you can move. And so this panel there's different designs to it, but it's a big panel that's all pleated, and those pleats are permanent. And then they're ironed in, and then we Velcro them to the pants. But and then when you do that demi-plie position, it opens up into that fan. And so we select when we go to India at least once, usually twice a year, and we select all of the saris and the costuming and work with the costume, the tailors over there to make all of the costumes for our ensemble.
And how the 5 people, their costumes match, so we kind of got to do it.
And you select the colors as
Yes.
they have them. You don't have them custom dyed for you.
No, but there are
Sari stores have
there are so many options.
literally like a million saris. So, but you have to think about what region of India, what region of that state do you want to represent? What kind of weave do you want? What kind of colors do you want? What is the progression? What is the intricate embroidery in gold at the bottom? How thick? How small? What are the pictures? What are the patterns? Is it an antique kind of print? Is it a modern print? Is it, how beautiful is the parrot that's done there? So we look at all of those things.
And there's many different cuts and styles within that, and we have one that we like most, but there's books of different ways that they can cut
And now
make the sari.
the fashion in Bharatanatyam is that people wear different pieces, like 6 pieces from various costumes. So some people are trying different things. And so everyone has, again, they're putting their stamp on something that is widely done. So it's personalized in that way for us.
Because the costume at the end in the last number that was in red was flatter with fewer pleats.
That is our
very
rehearsal
different.
outfit. That's a practice video. So that's our rehearsal outfit. So it's a sari but worn shorter and with pants underneath.
Okay, thank you.
You were paying attention. The American Dance Festival in North Carolina.
You want to watch more?
Thank you. Jum